Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. So before we begin, I just have a couple quick announcements to make. First of all, you can join us for live free switch training at IT Expo. That is coming up really quickly, February 12th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's an all-day event. There's going to be several sessions where you can learn how to install and configure a working FreeSwitch system for only $25. And the sunshine is free. If you're from somewhere cold like I am, that's something to really look forward to. Anthony Minasali is actually going to also be speaking at this conference. His talk is entitled From Open Source to Mainstream, Bringing Complex Technology to the Masses. And he's also going to be on an open source panel in open source world called What's Next in VoIP/RTC. So don't miss out on that. Next piece of news is ClueCon news. We are currently running our early bird special at $5.99 for ClueCon registration for 9 more days. So make sure you take advantage of that. And what makes ClueCon really special is that one registration is going to give you access to everything. You don't have to buy more than one ticket. You don't have to register for different events. You just register once and you're invited to everything that we have to offer. That's all of our talks, every networking event, every lunch, every breakout session, every dinner, everything that we do. So make sure you take advantage of that, especially if you already know that you're going to ClueCon. And if you're not sure yet, you can go to cluecon.com and learn more, or visit us in our Slack channel at signalwire.community, and you can ask us any questions that you have right there. Last piece of ClueCon news, if you are interested in sponsoring ClueCon, there are still opportunities available for that. That gets you a ton of exposure to the open source VoIP telecom community. And the earlier you sign up, the more exposure you get. So make sure to jump on that opportunity. And that's all the news I have for today. So we'll go over to David Duffett so we can start ClueCon Weekly.
We're back with another ClueCon Weekly. It's always a pleasure to do a ClueCon Weekly, but this week it's an extra special pleasure because I've got Jared Smith, the man that taught me Asterisk many years ago and is now the Vice President of Community Development. Is that right, Jared?
Yeah, open source community development.
All right, of open source community development for Sangoma and specifically around the Asterisk open source project. Jared, I'm going to throw in a quick, unprepared question first. Do you remember the first time we met?
I do remember the first time we met. It was in Dallas, right before the week before Astricon at an Astricon training.
Jared, I can trump you and go back even further in time than that.
Oh, wait a minute! You're right. We did meet. I think we did meet in at Astricon in London, didn't we?
And Berlin, Paris.
That's right.
I think I'm right saying that the first one of those was Berlin. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
I seem to remember it went Berlin, Paris, and London last. And then, yes, you're quite right. We had an Astricon in Dallas, or you guys had an Astricon in Dallas, because I wasn't part of it just then. But I did come over to attend the So-Colin Associates Asterisk Boot Camp just ahead of that.
Right.
And do you remember the year, Jared? I'm putting you on the spot.
Was that 2005?
2006.
2006.
Yeah, for all of the above, for the European Astricons, my Asterisk class, and for Astricon in Dallas. As well, the West End. It was a good long time ago.
It was a good long time ago. I seem to remember that you had bought the laptop to do the training, and we had to fight a little hardware problem on your laptop.
Indeed. In fact, if I could give the ClueCon Weekly audience one special piece of advice from back in that day, it was never buy a brand new laptop and try and throw Linux on it in a hurry, because the chances are it's going to have some driver or something in there that's not necessarily going to, goodness me, I've got a little bit of noise in the background, apologies for that. It's going to have some little driver that's going to catch Linux out. And do you remember, we actually ended up, I think we broke the hard drive in the laptop and I had to take it back to Fry's at the time.
Yep. Fun times,
yeah.
Fun times.
Yeah, desperate times and desperate measures and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that was back in the day. Again, back in history, you did work at Digium as both training manager and worldwide community director at one stage as well.
Yep. Yeah, I spent some time doing both training and focusing on the open source community. So
Now, just talk us through what you got up to since that and what's brought you to where you are now, please.
Okay, so I worked at Digium for a number of years, like I said. After that, I got recruited by Red Hat to run the Fedora project. I've been involved with Red Hat Linux and the Fedora project for a number of years, and they hired me to come run the Fedora project for a couple of years there. So that was fantastic. And then,
Gerald, just before you move on, just for folk that might be watching and not know, what is the relationship between Fedora and Red Hat?
So Fedora is a community-driven operating system that's kind of sponsored by Red Hat, but much of the work takes place out there in the open source community with about 14,000 volunteers all around the world. Red Hat does pay a small staff to help out with kind of release engineering and infrastructure and tooling kind of bits, but the vast majority of the work gets done by volunteers, and that is that Linux distribution that comes out of that work called Fedora kind of ends up being the basis for much of what goes into, say, like Red Hat Enterprise Linux and some of the other Red Hat products out there. But it's a way for them to kind of get a gauge of what's going on out there, in open source development. The Fedora distribution tends to be a little more forward-looking and a little more kind of on the cutting edge, but hopefully not the bleeding edge of technology out there. And then that gives Red Hat a good opportunity to look and say, okay, what's working that's coming out and what's not working, and how can we, make things work. And every once in a while, they'll branch off of Fedora to make a new release of Red Hat Enterprise Linux.
Right. So it might be a bit strong to just call Fedora Red Hat Beta, but it's kind of
it's much the reason that doesn't work, in my opinion, is because if you're calling it Red Hat Beta, it makes it sound like Red Hat's doing the work. Like I said, while Red Hat does pay the Fedora project leader and pays a number of people, in kind of the infrastructure team, much of that work is happening by volunteers, and so it's not a beta for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. In fact, when they do branch off and get ready to release Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they do have their own beta process that's completely independent from Fedora.
Right, I'm with you. Okay, so sorry, I interrupted. Carry on from Fedora.
Like I said, I was the Fedora project leader for a couple of years. Then I got hired by Bluehost to run their open source program office, help them with interaction with various open source communities in the web hosting space. From there, I went on to Capital One to run the open source program office there, helped them release, I think the time I was there, we released 17 or 18 open source projects, and help get those out there in the public. And then Tony finally twisted my arm and got me to come work at Sangoma. So here I am back with my old family from Digium plus the new guys at Sangoma, and back doing Asterisk and voice over IP stuff once again. So
yeah, that Tony Lewis has a lot to answer for in the industry, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, when you came to Sangoma, you were not there with the job that you currently have. One thing I picked up, and of course I already knew in the description as you went through, is that open source is very much in your blood and in your DNA. It's been part of your career. So just tell us a little bit how what you were recruited to do in Sangoma and how you've ended up moving to the position that you're in now.
When I first started at Sangoma, I was hired to do what they called special projects. They needed somebody to come run a small team, kind of a tiger team of developers to come in and solve specific problems, and then, not necessarily own a particular product or own a particular, product line, but simply come in and solve a particular problem, then move on and help another team solve a particular problem. So when I first got hired, I was doing a lot of kind of internal systems monitoring and reporting and, helping build the versions of the free PPX distribution, things like that. I soon moved over and took over the cloud division of Sangoma, so running our PBExact in the cloud, running some of the SipStation service, managing that team, and then just recently I switched over to doing more focus on open source community development. And
in fact, let me just stop you there, because one kind of nuclear thing happened in between the first two and the last one, didn't it? The Sangoma acquisition of Digium, and therefore the project.
Yep. So
yes, give us a little bit more detail about how you came to be doing the open source development role and what that role entails.
Well, part of that was just due, like I said, Sangoma acquired Digium, brought them in as part of the family. As part of that, there was some shuffling around of people and projects, and it became fairly clear to everybody that Sangoma needed somebody focused on the open source community, focused on the Asterisk project and the free PBX project, and not necessarily focused on, how do we monetize those or how do we turn those into commercial products, but simply just focused on the open source community and doing right by the community. Previous to my stepping into this role, that was something that had been done by numerous people as kind of a side part of their job, but it was nobody's full-time job to really focus on that. So I'm excited to be able to do that with, like I said, most of my time here, and really hope to give back in meaningful ways to both communities.
Great news, very positive for the open source community in general. And of course, although if you went back years and years and years, there might have been the odd raising of eyebrows at each other between the free PBX projects and the Asterisk open source project. I think these days we're all on an even keel, and very happy to be part of the general open source communications community. And of course, it's not just us, is it? There's other projects like OpenSIPs, Kama, Ilio, Homa, to name but a few.
Yep, and we use a lot of those projects either internally or, as part of some of our publicly facing services as well. So we use Kama, Ilio, we use FreeSwitch, we use Homer, we use a number of these different kind of open source real-time communication platforms, and it's nice to have a big and welcoming and open source community with a bunch of these different tools.
Yeah, it's great, and it is great that we're kind of like a family in terms of that kind of interdependence almost of different companies and different projects working with each other, which is always something very nice to see. So in this new role, Jared, what do you think you're going to find yourself doing in terms of getting out there in the community?
One thing is focusing on communications with the community. Sometimes Digium in the past or Sangoma in the past have not been as communicative with the various open source communities as they probably should have been. Part of that is highlighting new features as they're being worked on, but also things like soliciting feedback from the community. Hey, what would you like to see in the next version of Asterisk, or what's a pain point for you in free PBX that you'd like to see fixed in this next release? Asking those sorts of questions. So that's a big part of it. The other exciting part of it, at least for me, is starting to gather some statistics on, specifically on the Asterisk forums or the free PBX forums. How many questions are people asking that never get an answer, or what's the average time to a first response on a post on the forums? Trying to use a little analytics to make sure that we really are taking care of the community and answering questions and helping people when they have problems. So.
You were making it sound there, Jared, a bit like a contact center wallboard.
Oh, it's not going to be quite that advanced, but you can't improve what you don't measure. So I like at least having some measurements to say, are we doing better? We think we're doing better, but are we really doing better by some quantitative measures? So.
Indeed, in a previous role of mine, we used to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
That's right.
So you've got to get to those measurements. Great. Okay. So now you mentioned Asterisk, and of course, Asterisk is the first open source communications engine in the world. Very exciting stuff, and has been there for a good while now. In fact, it's turned 20, hasn't it, from my recollection? Mm-hmm. And so, what version are we up to with Asterisk now, Jared?
We released Asterisk 17 at AstriCon this past October, and we're working on Asterisk 18 to hopefully be released sometime this coming fall.
Right, yes, I was at that very AstriCon. In fact, since the first AstriCon we worked together on in 2006, well, in fact, 4 AstriCons in the 1 year there. I've managed to get to every AstriCon since, and I plan to continue as long as my little legs will get me there. I'm hoping to participate. Anyway, in Asterisk 17, what were the highlights, Jared? What would you say were the key things that were achieved in 17?
I think just off the top of my head, there's several things that are new in 17. Some updates for video with some of the SFU work that we've done for video in Asterisk. improvements there. There was obviously some kind of performance improvements under the covers. We've done some things to try to make PJSIP a little more usable, so that we can transition off of the old ChanSIP channel driver and really give people a great experience with Chan PJSIP. So those are probably the highlights that stand out in my mind.
Great stuff. Yeah, and that's building on things, well, as is obvious really, but perhaps bears on stuff that have been in the previous versions, because this is all very incremental, isn't it?
It is. I think for the most part, you're not going to see a whole lot of revolutionary changes in Asterisk. I mean, it's a fairly stable platform. It's a it's a solid platform that works well, and I think you're going to see more evolutionary changes there rather than revolutionary changes, which is really what people want. I mean, if you're building a platform on top of Asterisk, or you're building a PBX on top of Asterisk, or even some more esoteric application, what you want is stability, what you want is reliability, and what you want is is reducing those unknowns. And sometimes it's fun with a new open source project or a young open source project to make revolutionary changes. But at the same time, that can grate on people's nerves if they're saying, every time I go to upgrade Asterisk, it breaks everything, or everything's changed and I have to rewrite everything. So, what at least from my standpoint, and talking with the engineers at Sangoma, what we're trying to do is just kind of reduce that uncertainty, reduce those major changes, and make evolutionary changes. So.
Yeah, well, notwithstanding any brand new technology coming along that needs to be included, like a WebRTC or something like that, we are really in the era of optimization rather than kind of mega change in terms of new features and functionality that can be thrown in.
Yep, I just think back to the early days of Asterisk, when we went from using pipes to using commas in the dial plan, or things like that. That while they were important changes and the developers felt like they needed to be made, it was disruptive to the users and to the community to make those that level of change. So
they were not without their pain, were they? Those changes.
They were not without their pain.
Now, Jared, just now you mentioned SFU. And I'm just thinking there may be some people watching who are not familiar with SFU in terms of video and versus an MCU, because as you know, FreeSwitch has the opposite approach. It has the MCU inside it. Right. You spend a moment just explaining those differences, do you think?
Sure. So an SFU is a selective forwarding unit, a nice three-letter acronym. We have to have enough of those to keep all the the buzzword jockeys happy. But it's really about forwarding on one particular stream of video if you have multiple streams coming in. Whereas typically an MCU is kind of what people like to call the Brady Bunch effect, where you have a bunch of small.
Yes, I think the MCU kind of does all the rendering of the little people form and sends it off.
And as one big, you're right, as one big rendered video, exactly.
Yeah. Whereas an SFU sends the little things to the endpoint, and the endpoint can
put them all together.
So if you wanted an extra big Jared and an extra small me, you could do that with an SFU, but you probably
do that with an SFU. That's you have to do it for everybody if you do it on an MCU, or create a whole another video render stream, and that can be computationally expensive.
Indeed. Great. Well, thanks very much for telling us a little bit about Asterisk, its current version. In terms of the future, what do you think is going to happen? Just either, well, you can choose how you answer this question, either in terms of technology around VoIP and RTC, or in open source in general. I was very interested not so long ago to learn that Microsoft were taking Chromium and making that the basis of their Edge browser, which was a little bit of a surprise for some. But we're in a world of constant change. What do you see out there, Jared?
Well, I think in general, in kind of the Asterisk and telephony space, WebRTC is obviously continue to grow and be more important. There's more and more endpoints out there that people are carrying around with them that are fully capable, of doing WebRTC, and I think we'll continue to see that work. There's still a lot of interoperability that testing that needs to happen. There's some there's still some improvements that need to happen there to make it a smooth experience. And we're almost to the point. I can't say that we're quite there yet, but we're almost to the point where you can do WebRTC with just about any browser and it's going to work, and you don't have to say, oh, that doesn't work with this browser, you have to try that browser. We're not quite there, but we're getting closer there. I think you're seeing a little bit of a move away from some of the more proprietary codecs out there to more towards kind of open standards and open source codec implementations. So that's all good. Definitely on the voice side, we're seeing that. Hopefully we'll see more of that on the video side in the next few years. With open source in general, I think we're kind of, how to put this, I think we're kind of in that awkward teenager phase of open source. When open source was kind of the new hot thing, everybody was rushing in, and it was kind of like a toddler, running around and bumping into things and falling down and getting back up, and you just didn't know what was going to happen with open source in general. Now I think we're in that kind of awkward teenage years where everybody knows we're out there and we're doing great things, but there's still some maturity that needs to happen. There's still some growth that needs to happen, and it's an exciting time to be in open source. No longer are you those weird hippies that hang out in your basement and give code away for free. But open source is used everywhere, in the stock exchanges, in the banks, in the financial industry, in the medical industry. So it's not just this weird esoteric thing anymore.
Indeed, that the point has been proven, hasn't it? I remember back in the early days of Asterisk, we would talk about things like the Apache web server being out there. But now, actually, if you mention Asterisk and FreeSwitch, they're all out there in various different places, from commercial appliances through to individual corporate solutions, through to the toolkits of consultants who are solving things on a daily basis for their clients. You don't have to go very far to find an Asterisk or indeed a FreeSwitch these days.
That's right.
Okay, now Jared, asking you to look into the future was actually kind of reeling you in a little bit, because you gave us a preview of the things that you might say at Open Source World, which is coming up in February. 12th to the 14th in Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
You're going to be there, and I wonder if you could tell us about some of the things you're going to be doing there.
Well, one of the things I'm most excited about for the conference there is that we're going to be running a little bit of a contest just to have some fun and give away some prizes. In traditional conferences like AstroCon, we've kind of had a contest that you helped run at times, David, for see who can be the fastest to get dial tone on a phone or ring, make a phone ring, that sort of thing. We're going to do something similar to that, but this time it's going to be around configuring Chan PJ SIP. So if you're going to be at the conference in February in Fort Lauderdale, please look over the configuration file for Chan PJ SIP. Know your way around that, and you may win a prize.
Right, and they're usually some very good prizes as well. I mean, in fact, just a little bit of AstroCon history. It was me that initiated the very first contest called the Fastest Dude to the Dial Tone back in those days. And you were very helpful in that as well, Jared. But reason it was called the Fastest Dude to the Dial Tone was back in the day we had 3 Asterisk servers with analog cards in and analog phones attached to them, and it was just a race to see who could get a dial tone to that analog phone fastest. And I remember people that were in the know were kind of missing out parts of Asterisk to make the compilation quicker and things like that. There's a lot of excitement at the time.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that contest. So.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, so there's that contest at Open Source World. There is also, of course, dangerous demos at Open Source World as well, where James Bowden, who I'm sure will be having along here on ClueCon Weekly before too long to talk about that, but yeah, he will be running that. He'll be the ringmaster for that spectacle. And anything else you're hoping to achieve at IT Expo and Open Source World in general, Jared, since you're investing the time to come along?
Yeah, as always, I'm trying to get out there and talk with different people. Reach out to the community, shake hands, say hi, listen to people's feedback. We've also got a little what we call our open source advisor, reseller advisory council meeting. So people who are reselling free PBX or other open source type projects, we want to talk to those resellers and get to know them as well. So if people are interested in that, they can reach out to me and I can put them in touch with our sales team to get them as part of that meeting as well.
Great stuff. Talking of reaching out to you, Jared, if people do want to get in touch with you in order to talk about Asterisk community stuff or whatever, I can see your email address is just under your name.
It's under my name right there.
Yes. And how would people contact you via Twitter, for example, if they wanted to?
My handle on Twitter is jsmith. Really, really imaginative. You can reach out to me on the Asterisk forums or the Free PBX forums or via email or via Twitter. I'm not hard to get a hold of.
And do tell me
IRC for those people who still use IRC. So
yeah, I was going to say, I hoped you could confirm that you are still on IRC somewhere.
Every single day. You can find me in Pound Asterisk or Pound Asterisk Dev.
Great stuff. Great stuff. I once heard a piece of advice given by somebody from IRC. It was, never move in with somebody you meet on IRC. Great advice. Okay, well, thank you very much for stopping by and talking to us at ClueCon Weekly. Just talking of contests, I should mention that at ClueCon itself, which will be in August later this year, we have a contest day at the beginning where there is a hackathon for developers. There's Maker Challenge for those that are not necessarily coders but want to get involved in doing something innovative. And that's always bags of fun. In fact, myself and James Bodie collaborated last time on it. I think we were trying to launch a ball over a certain distance or through a hole or something like that. I forget the exact details. It was all a blur. But contests are cool and they're always a lot of fun. Do you have dates for Astricon this year, Jared?
We're just in the process of nailing down the contract with the hotel, and then we'll announce dates. So we hope by the end of the month here to be able to announce the dates. But it's looking like it's going to be October timeframe in Orlando, Florida. Great
stuff. Okay, well, I hope we can continue collaborating together. And of course, you're warmly invited to ClueCon, and I will be trying to make my way to Astricon again for another Astricon of excitement. Let me ask you the question I always ask people near the end of a ClueCon Weekly episode, Jared. Is there anything else that you would like to say or to tell us?
Oh, boy. I would just say, hey, thanks to everybody who participates in open source. Thank you to everybody who writes patches or submits bug reports or writes documentation or just promotes these projects out with their friends and their communities. It really comes down to the people for me, and that's what keeps me coming back to this community and others like it. I love the people. You guys are like family to me, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jared, for the man who taught me Asterisk, the man whose job I did after he left, and we've shared a lot of things in common over the years. It's been great to have you on, and I hope you'll drop by another time later on down the dates and talk to us more about what's going on in Asterisk.
Happy to do it.
Thanks for coming on.